Hi folks, and welcome back to Fishing with Den. Today we're down on the tidal river again, and we're going to be testing this new hybrid feeder that I made last week on my 3D printer. And thank you for all your very constructive comments on what I've done so far, and also some comments on what I can do to improve it. Now what we're going to be doing today is testing this initial variation because I haven't had time to print off any of the new variations yet from your comments. And not only that, of course, depending on how things go today, we're going to end up in a situation where I might come up with some thoughts of my own based on the results of these tests. So the feeder itself then, the main thing about it, it has this circular bowl in the back here. You put bait in there like pellets or corn or whatever, or ground bait. You put your hook bait in as well. Now that may go on the top or it may go in first, haven't quite decided on that one yet. And the idea is that you then mould ground bait or pellets around it. This lower rim around the sides here means that the ground bait in this case, which is what I'm using today, can slide off the sides and form a sort of a nice carpet. But this circular bowl holds a great big ball of bait, which is hopefully going to entice the fish to just literally suck that up. And because your hook bait's inside it, that comes up with it, and so to some extent it's possible that you might not even need a hook bait. But hey, we'll find that out as we go along. Okay, I've got a 4-inch hook length, size 12 hook, 2 pieces of corn on the hook, and we're pretty much ready to start doing the testing. Now, as I say, today is a testing day, so it may well be that I don't get a lot of catching done because I've got a number of cameras. I've got obviously the GoPro you're looking at now. There's my camcorder down here, which is zoomed in to about 30 meters out into the river, which is where I'm going to be casting this thing. So hopefully I can see whether it lands face up or face down, because that's one of the main issues with this. Does it land face up every time? Because if it doesn't, it ends up like that. There's hardly any point, is there? So that's the premise of the whole thing. It's literally just a great big ball of bait that stays inside the feeder for the fish to home in on. Other cameras, I've got this Water Wolf underwater camera, which I may try and put in line like that just to see underwater if this thing does land on its base all the time. Now of course, with the two things attached, it's going to be really heavy, so I'm not really going to be able to cast it too far, but we'll probably cast it down here. There's a little bit of a hollow under the tree there. I'll put it down under there, and we may get some shots of how the feeder goes in and also how the feed comes off. In addition to that, I've got an action camera on a stick, and what I'm going to do with that one is, because I can't obviously go out into the middle of the river to see how this is landing, I'll put the stick out as far as I can go with my wellies and just cast down to it, see how it lands again from a different perspective, looking down on it, and also how the bait spreads out. It presumably will spread out like it did in the tank on the previous video. If you haven't seen the previous video, by the way, I'll put a link up there now for you, so you can get the idea of how I designed and developed this whole thing. But as I say, today is all about testing, so let's get on with it. So first of all then, let's have a look at the general flight characteristics. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my bait in first into the little bowl there, put some more sweet corn in and around it, and then I'm going to fill the rest of the feeder with ground bait. Just bear with me a second while I get this done. Just mould on a good lump of ground bait. Now this feeder, as I say, weighs 50 grams or thereabouts when it starts off, so by the time I've added on this ground bait, you're probably looking at close to 100 grams. But it's designed to be a big heavy feeder because the fishing I do tends to be based on catching fish by putting in lots of bait, because they're ravenous and there's lots of them. So anyway, that's the feeder set up, ready to go. I'll cast it out and we'll see what the thing casts like. Now, I have had one previous cast just to set the line clip, but without bait. But if I cast that out, it seems to be flying well, and certainly when I was watching it through the water there, through the air there, it seemed to be flying flat and level. So next thing of course is, does it hold bottom? There's a smallish amount of current at the moment because we're arriving at around about high tide, so I'll just see how it goes for a second or two. Again, I may put some little bumps on the underside of it just to sort of grip into any sand or silt which is down there, and you can maybe see this bank here, it's pretty much all sand. But again, we'll just have to wait and see how it holds in the current. But that's the point of testing these sorts of things, isn't it? Okay, well, the feeder's been in for a minute or two now, and as everything is nice and tight against the current, it's a bit of a bow in the line, and we're actually holding very well at the moment. We'll know more later on once we've got a much heavier current. The tide's going to go out fairly shortly, and it will pick up quite dramatically. So we may have to go to the heavier one, which is about 66 to 70 grams, something like that. But certainly so far, looking good. Okay, so flight-wise, I've had 3 or 4 casts now, and it seems to fly perfectly, nice and flat and level. But now I've just got the thing set up again, but as you can see, this is a real contraption, this, and I don't know if it's going to work. This is my Water Wolf underwater camera, and I'm going to cast this out to see if this hits the bottom with its face up, and hopefully this will be sitting like that behind it, watching what's going on. Now, I'm not convinced we're going to catch any fish down there. I know there could be some, but if we do and they take off, it'll certainly be an action shot. But the main thing is to see how this thing lands in the water, and also get an idea of how the ground bait breaks up and how the ball stays together, if it stays together at all. So we'll give this a few goes and see what happens. It's really difficult to cast, which is why I'm not going to even try and cast it out into the main stream. But if I just underarm this really heavy, like a house brick. Right, straighten it all up, and we'll just leave that in there for a minute or two to see how it goes. Now, I've been in for a couple of minutes, so I'm going to reel it in, and we'll see what everything looks like. Well, all the bait's emptied out of the feeder, and that was one of the concerns I had previously. Let me just put this anti-reverse on. When we did the testing, there were some pellets and also some sweet corn stuck in this circular area. Seems to have come out, but that could have just been washed out on the way in. We'll know more after we view the footage. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put a few pellets in there. Wrong. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my bait in first, and then I'm going to put a few pellets in there. All experimentation, guys. We'll get the ground bait on, and we'll cast it back in. It's really awkward to cast, and so heavy. Even this rod, which is a heavy duty rod, this thing's designed to cast up to 120 grams, and this is obviously struggling because the actual weight of the thing is probably more like 250 grams out there, or 200 anyway. Just get that nice and straightened out so everything's in line, hopefully. There. Right, normally you wouldn't pull the feeder out of position, but I want to make sure that the camera lines up with the feeder itself. Current's not very strong at the moment, which is handy because with the camera on I think we'd be struggling otherwise. Well, this is my third cast. I'll do one more just to see if it is landing the right way up, and then we'll do some tests with the camera on a stick. I'll put the feeder down in front of it and we'll get a different perspective view to see how this all breaks up. No pellets staying in the thing. I keep trying to put the pellets in first like you always do, but I'm actually putting the bait in first. Well, that's what I should be doing on this one. Right, and then the ground bait. Okay. Oof. Real spladoosh, isn't it? Okay, that's 4 casts, so I'll bring it in. This time what we'll do is, heavy, we'll take off this camera and we'll use the action camera on a stick and take some images from that, just to see how that performs. It may be that getting a different perspective on it from both above the water and also below the water, we may be able to see a little bit more clearly how this thing is operating. But I'm just going to take off this camera for the moment because it is really just a ridiculous looking rig, isn't it? Right, I've retackled and got the rig set up as per we've been doing. I've put the stick in. I've actually put the camera underwater because the water does look a little bit murky and we're likely to get a better shot by doing this. And all I'm going to do, there's still quite a good current down here. I'm going to drop this down in front. In fact, I'll do it that way so that, there we go. I can actually see it, but I don't know how clear it'll be on a camera. So we'll let that dissolve. I'll grab myself a cup of tea and we'll come back in a minute and have a look at the dispersal pattern. Okay, so I can see it's done its thing, and as I lifted up there were still pellets in it, but they did come out as I pulled the feeder up, and so that would deposit more feed into the area on the way out, and I just had one piece of sweet corn that was left in there. I'll do a few more tests just to see that this camera is actually getting what we want, and we'll get back to you shortly. Well, lifted that out after a few minutes, and there's a bit of bait I noticed came out still, so we might need to look into the release in here. But then, as I said before on the previous video, do I want there to be some bait left in there so that it's actually a target for the carp? Again, more experimentation required. But now we just need to have a look at the results from the camera down in the water down there and see what we got. The action camera looking into the water one, I think it's a bit of a total bust on that. I'm going to give it one more quick go and literally put this right down next to where the feeder is, because it could just be that it's murky water, or I really don't know. But we'll give it one more go to see if we can see a dispersal pattern from above. Right, well, I've got that in slightly shallower water now, and I can see the dispersal pattern, and I can also see how the current's taking bait off the feeder. So what I'm going to do, just in case that underwater camera doesn't work, I'm going to use this camera on my phone, and I'm going to do a few seconds of recording from above just to get some kind of view, just in case. Right, this is where I don't want to fall in, of course. Right, let's try not to disturb the water. Excuse my view of the rear. But there we go. You can actually see we've got a dispersal pattern, and we've got the nice ball of bait sitting there with some sweet corn showing. So that's actually not too bad at all. Even with this fairly swift current now, because the tide's going out, we've got ground bait sitting around it. But you notice how the particle baits, both the pellets and the sweet corn, when that comes off, a lot of it rolls away. Yes, it gets trapped further down, but it doesn't stay right next to the feeder in the river. Obviously, on a lake or a pond, it's going to stay around it. But even then, you know, you're going to get stuff washed out. So this idea of holes around the circular bowl, I'll give it a go, but I'm just wondering about whether it might be wise to keep it in at the moment. It's going to be subject to more testing by the look of things. Okay, that's been in for a few minutes now, and we've still got a nice ball of bait. So what I'm going to try and do is lift this up, if I can find the end of the line. And see what we've got in it. As I lift up, yep, there is some bait still in there, but it does actually come out. Now, a little bit stuck still on there, but that's just one of those things. Yeah, the other thing is I'm noticing, if you look at the current against this feeder, it's automatically staying what would be face up. If I just try and spin this around so it's that way around, automatically it's going so that the actual face of the bowl is facing in what would be the correct direction. If I put this down, it's going to hit the bottom and it's going to stay on its back. So, quite reassuring, that one. I've just had a quick look at the footage from the last time I put this action camera in, and this time, because it was so close, I've definitely got some good footage. I can't see it all that well because I've done it on the phone and the light's just getting into the screen. But we seem to be progressing, guys. So far, I'm actually really pleased with this. There are obviously some modifications that I may well make, but yep, so far I seem to be on the right track. So again, the tide's starting to go out pretty quick now, and I'm just starting to get a little bit of movement on the feeder. You can tell because the rod tip's just bouncing a little bit as it moves along. So what I'm going to try next is I'm going to go to this bigger, heavier feeder, which says 66 grams, and it's only what, 16 or so grams heavier, but we'll see how that works. And obviously we won't possibly need to consider putting those bumps on that I was telling you about on the bottom. Changing the feeder is pretty much as easy as you expected. Oh, there's one piece of corn left in there. Take the tail rubber off, move the stem out, and now because it's attached to the end of the rod, let's get rid of that. I grab this one, take the stem out of this, obviously. Should have thought of that then. And now you can just lay it on the line, push the new stem in, tail rubber back on, like that, and we're ready to go. So that was as quick and easy as you'd expect. It's just occurred to me I hadn't actually weighed the feeder when it's fully loaded. Now obviously I know it's heavy, and this one is the 66 gram plus the ground bait and all the rest of it, so I've just turned my scales on and put them onto grams. I've tied a loop in the line just above the feeder, and we've got 125 grams fully loaded, and that is actually a fair old weight for a feeder. This rod, it's a heavy duty rod, but it's designed to cast up to 120 grams, so I don't suppose 5 grams is going to make a lot of difference. And certainly based on me casting it out, let's just do that for you. Yeah, you can feel that it's going to be quite heavy, but it's not the sort of thing you'd want to try and cast 100 meters, obviously, but for trying to throw 30 meters or so, no problem whatsoever. And that's the heavy version of the feeder. So the lighter one is probably going to be what, 15 grams, 16 grams lighter, so you'd be looking at, I don't know, what, 110 grams. So that would be well within the capabilities of this Free Spirit power feeder rod, which is designed for up to 120 grams. Anyway, we'll see now if this holds bottom or not. That feeder's been in there now for, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 minutes, and I haven't seen any movement on it whatsoever. So we're definitely at the top end of the range what this rod can cast, but that does seem to be able to cope with fairly fast flowing rivers. I'm going to try it on a different river at some point in the next week or two, which is a lot deeper, probably sort of 18 feet out where I'm going to be fishing. And there's also another section of river which I haven't fished for some time, which is really deep and really wide, and the current tends to go through quite well. So I'm going to have to do a few tests on this sort of thing before we're completely happy with the thing, but yep, so far not bad at all. I just wanted to get back, put all this together along with your comments, and then in a couple of seconds for you and probably a few hours for me, I'll get back to you with my thoughts and the results of the tests. Okay then folks, so here we are back with the results. It's actually 2 or 3 days later now, hence the shorter haircut. Life got in the way, but that 2 or 3 days has given me a bit of time to sit and have a think about how we did on the tests and where we can go from here. Overall, I'd have to say I'm pretty pleased so far, but I do think there's going to be a lot more testing to go. But let's actually talk about the tests in a bit more detail. First of all, the shape and size of the feeder. I think I've got the slimline shape about right. I did originally make one which was somewhat wider, but with this one, as you can see, it sort of fits into the palm of your hand. It's quite big, but you can actually get ground bait around it like that. The one I made before was wider, and you just couldn't get your hand around it, and it just wasn't right. So I haven't even shown you that because that was the first failure. And as Einstein said, failure is just one of the steps on the way to success. Anyway, back to this. So shape and size, that was fine. Balance, if I just put that on like that, you can see that it lies with its base to the floor. What that means is, in flight, it actually flew straight and level, and it actually, even with the ground bait on it, was sitting upright like that. So face up, in other words. So again, that was good. And that's because I got the centre of gravity right. By having this tube with the line running through it above the base of the feeder instead of below it, as you saw, it makes it sit very well like that. If I'd lowered this down onto the back of the feeder, the thing would have sat like that, which wasn't very good. So, got that part right anyway. As I say, in terms of flight, as you saw from the video, when I cast out, it flew straight and level, and it entered the water very nicely. And it seems to have gone down in that orientation. The weight on the back, as I said, what we did there was to just keep it nice and square for now, just as a prototype. I probably will do a different shape and mold this into the base of the plastic part at some point, but it's just easy to make square ones for the prototyping stage. In terms of how it stayed on the bottom, obviously if you're on a still water, it's not really relevant. If you cast it out, it's pretty much going to stay there. But because I also want to use this for carp on rivers, what I'm probably going to do is actually, when I mould the lid next time, I'll mould it with 3 or 4 feet on it. I probably will also put some either feet or some other sort of thing to grab onto the plastic thing here. Haven't quite decided what I'm going to end up with there. I've been messing around with different ideas, but anyway, that's roughly where we're going with it. So in terms of the general shape and size of the feeder and everything else, pretty good. Again, as you saw from the video, when it went down with that contraption with the underwater camera on, it does seem to land that way. In terms of emptying, this did what was expected. This area here all fell away and created a fairly loose carpet, and we did end up with the feed still sitting in here. Now I probably will substitute the corn and the pellets for just ground bait, I think, when I do the full fishing test on the thing, although we can swap and change around and see how that goes. Internally, another modification I made, or will be making, is, you probably can't see this, but inside there, these little rails here were stopping the feed from coming out. And in fact, the new version, I've just angled the side rails, hopefully you can see that, so that now, when you've got the stem in, they actually angle straight into the stem itself, obviously. Another suggestion, which a lot of you guys came up with, was to put holes around the base of the bowl here. The idea being to allow water to come in through and sort of allow the bait to disperse more quickly. But, as I think I mentioned in the video, I'm in two minds about that, because the idea is to have a ball of bait in here, and if you're allowing water in, it kind of defeats the object because it allows the bait to come out. But I've made one, we'll give it a test because it was a very popular suggestion, and thank you all for the suggestions that you did make. And just a couple of other ideas I've come up with is, this is the one I've just shown you with the normal size cup. But also, you can see that I've made this one on this side a little bit bigger, so it actually runs along the contours of the outer rim. I'm wondering if by making it larger like this, that might do away with the need to have the holes in the side of the thing, because the carp can get its mouth in and suck, and it won't be like sucking against the vacuum. It'll actually be able to suck out the contents a bit better. That's the thought anyway, and we'll wait and see on that one. I've also been playing around with some other ideas to sort of reduce the weight of the plastic and also help the dispersal of the ground bait. And if we take this one as the sort of standard one, you'll see I've removed these wings here and also the main support bar there. Actually, I've also reduced the height of the cup, but that may go back up again, I'm not sure yet. I'm just playing around with these ideas at the moment, but so far anyway, we've got to a point where we've got a product which seems to do the job. It's not perfect by any means, and that's going to take quite a bit more testing. So what I propose to do is next week we'll go out and I'll do the first actual fishing test with a variety of these things. And what I might do is do it like as a head-to-head test against a cage feeder and the new hybrid feeder. See which one does the best. Anyway, that's for next week. Hope you enjoyed this week's though. If you did, as always, click the button. If you want to subscribe, you can do that too. And until the next time, bye for now.